17-year-old Zara walked down the busy streets of downtown, her backpack slung over one shoulder and her phone in the other hand. She had just finished her final exam and couldn't wait to celebrate. Her graduation was next week, and her dad had surprised her that morning with something special. "Pick out something nice for yourself," he had said, handing her his credit card with a warm smile. "You've worked so hard for this moment. Get whatever makes you happy." The black card felt heavy in her pocket as she walked past the fancy stores. She wasn't used to shopping in places like this. Her family had money now, but they hadn't always been wealthy. Her father often reminded her to stay humble and treat everyone with respect, no matter what. She stopped in front of a beautiful store called Elite Fragrances. The window display showed elegant perfume bottles that sparkled under the lights. She had always loved nice scents, and this seemed like the perfect place to find something special for her graduation gift. The store was smaller than she expected, but incredibly fancy. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, and the perfume bottles were displayed like precious jewels. The carpet was so thick her sneakers made no sound as she walked in. A few well-dressed customers were browsing quietly. Zara felt a bit out of place in her jeans and hoodie, but she reminded herself that she belonged here just as much as anyone else. She approached one of the display cases and began looking at the different bottles. The scents were amazing. She tried a few on her wrist, reading the descriptions carefully. One perfume caught her attention, a beautiful bottle with golden details. The price tag said $400, but her dad had told her not to worry about the cost. As she was testing another fragrance, she noticed a man in a suit watching her from across the store. He looked like he worked there, with his name tag and serious expression. She smiled politely when their eyes met, but he didn't smile back. The man walked over to her slowly. "Excuse me, miss," he said, his voice formal and cold. "Can I help you with something?" "Oh, yes, thank you," Zara replied cheerfully. "I'm looking for a graduation gift for myself. These perfumes are beautiful." The man, whose name tag read Robert Store Manager, looked her up and down. His eyes lingered on her casual clothes and sneakers. "I see. Well, these are very expensive items. Are you sure you're in the right place?" Zara felt confused by his question. "I'm sorry, what do you mean?" "These perfumes cost hundreds of dollars each," Robert said, speaking slowly as if she might not understand. "Perhaps you'd be more comfortable shopping somewhere more suitable for your budget?" The words stung, but Zara tried to stay polite. "I understand they're expensive, sir. My father gave me his credit card specifically for this purchase." Robert's eyebrows went up and he let out a small laugh. "Your father's credit card, I see. And what does your father do for work?" "He runs a tech company," Zara answered, wondering why this man was asking so many questions. She had never been questioned like this in a store before. "A tech company?" Robert repeated, clearly not believing her. "Right. Well, I think it would be best if you looked elsewhere. These products are for serious customers only." Other shoppers were starting to notice the conversation. Zara felt her cheeks getting warm with embarrassment. She had done nothing wrong, yet this man was treating her like she didn't belong. "Sir, I really can afford these perfumes," she said, her voice getting smaller. "I just want to buy a graduation gift." "Listen, young lady," Robert said, his voice getting louder. "I've been working in luxury retail for 15 years. I know when someone can afford our products and when they can't. You're clearly in the wrong place." Zara's heart was beating fast. She could feel the other customers staring at her. Some looked uncomfortable, others just curious. She reached into her pocket and pulled out the black credit card her father had given her. "Here's the card," she said, holding it out. "You can check if you want." Robert looked at the card and shook his head. "Anyone can get a fake card these days. I'm not falling for this. I've seen too many kids your age try to use stolen cards or fake ones." "It's not fake," Zara said, her voice cracking slightly. "Please, just let me buy something. I'm not trying to cause trouble." "The trouble is already caused," Robert said firmly. "I'm going to have to ask you to leave the store immediately. We've had problems before with people like you trying to use cards that don't belong to them." The phrase "people like you" hit Zara like a slap. She knew exactly what he meant, and it had nothing to do with her age or her clothes. Her father had warned her about moments like this, but experiencing it herself was different than just hearing about it. "People like me?" she repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. "You know what I mean," Robert said. "Now please leave before I have to call security." Tears started forming in Zara's eyes. She looked around the store, hoping someone would speak up for her, but everyone just looked away. The other customers seemed uncomfortable but unwilling to get involved. "I haven't done anything wrong," she said one last time. "Out. Now," Robert said, pointing toward the door. Zara walked toward the exit on shaky legs. She could feel everyone watching her as she left the store. Once she was outside, the tears she had been holding back finally came. She had never felt so humiliated in her entire life. She sat on a bench outside the store and called her father. Through her tears, she told him what had happened. His voice was calm, but she could hear the anger underneath. "Come home, sweetheart," he said gently. "We'll talk about this." On the bus ride home, Zara couldn't stop thinking about what had happened. She had been so excited about her graduation gift, and now the whole experience was ruined. She wondered how many other people had been treated the same way in that store. When she got home, her father was waiting for her. He hugged her tightly and listened as she told him every detail of what had happened. His jaw tightened when she repeated the manager's words about people like you. "I'm sorry you had to experience that, baby girl," he said. "But I want you to know that this says nothing about you and everything about that man's character." Zara nodded, but she still felt hurt and angry. She had always known that prejudice existed, but facing it herself was more painful than she had imagined. Her father was quiet for a long time after she finished her story. She could see the wheels turning in his mind. Finally, he looked at her with the expression she had never seen before. "Tomorrow," he said quietly, "we're going to pay that store another visit." That evening, while Zara tried to focus on her homework, her father David sat in his home office making phone calls. As the CEO of Tech Vision Solutions, he had built his company from nothing over the past 12 years. He understood business and he understood people. What had happened to his daughter wasn't just wrong, it was also bad business. David had grown up poor in a rough neighborhood. His own mother had cleaned offices at night to pay for his school clothes. He remembered the shame of being looked down on, of being judged by his appearance instead of his character. He had promised himself that when he became successful, he would never let anyone treat his family the way he had been treated. He started by researching elite fragrances online. The store was part of a small chain called Premium Retail Group, owned by a man named Christopher Hamilton. The company had 3 locations in the city and marketed itself as serving discerning customers who appreciate luxury. David dug deeper into the company's background. He found several online reviews that mentioned similar incidents. A Hispanic woman wrote about being followed around the store by security. An elderly black man complained about being ignored by sales staff for over 20 minutes while they helped younger white customers. Most telling was a lawsuit from 2 years ago. A young black professional had been accused of shoplifting when she was actually trying to return a gift. The case had been settled out of court, but the details were disturbing. David made notes as he researched. This wasn't just about one rude manager. This appeared to be a pattern of discrimination. He looked up the store's financial information through his business connections. Elite Fragrances generated about $2 million in revenue annually. Not bad for a small luxury retailer, but not impressive enough to survive a major scandal. He also researched Robert Mitchell, the manager who had humiliated his daughter. Robert had worked in retail for 15 years, just as he had claimed. But his previous employment history showed a concerning pattern. He had left his last 2 jobs after complaints from customers and staff about his attitude toward minorities. David leaned back in his chair, thinking. He could make one phone call and destroy this man's career. He could buy the entire chain of stores if he wanted to, but that wasn't the right approach. Zara was watching how he handled this situation, and he wanted to teach her something important about using power responsibly. The next morning, David woke up early and put on his best suit, a custom-tailored navy blue that had cost more than most people made in a month. He selected a tie that his business partner had given him when they'd signed their biggest contract. His shoes were Italian leather, polished to a mirror shine. He looked at himself in the mirror and thought about the journey that had brought him here. 20 years ago, he had been a college dropout working 3 jobs to support his sick mother. People had looked at him the same way Robert had looked at Zara yesterday. The difference was that now he had the resources to do something about it. "Dad, are you really going to that store today?" Zara asked at breakfast. She was picking at her cereal, still upset about yesterday. "Yes, we are," David said. "Both of us." I don't want to go back there, Zara said quietly. It was so embarrassing. David sat down next to his daughter. I understand, sweetheart. But sometimes we have to face uncomfortable situations to make sure they don't happen to other people. You did nothing wrong yesterday. That manager made assumptions based on ignorance and prejudice, and that's not acceptable. He paused, choosing his words carefully. When I was your age, I couldn't fight back against people who treated me unfairly. I didn't have the resources or the voice. But now we do, and with that comes a responsibility. Zara looked up at her father. She had always admired his strength and wisdom, but today she saw something different in his eyes. It wasn't anger, it was determination. What are you planning to do? She asked. I'm going to have a conversation with that manager, David said. A calm, professional conversation about customer service and business practices. At 10 o'clock, David's driver pulled up in front of their house. Instead of his usual car, David had requested the Maybach, the most impressive vehicle in his collection. The black sedan gleamed in the morning sun, its chrome details catching the light. As they drove toward the store, David explained his plan to Zara. We're not going there for revenge, he said. We're going there to create awareness. That manager needs to understand that his actions have consequences, not just for the customers he mistreats, but for his business. They pulled up in front of Elite Fragrances, and David could see Robert through the window arranging some displays. The manager noticed the expensive car immediately and straightened his tie, probably hoping to impress what he assumed was a wealthy customer. David's assistant, Kelly, got out of the front seat first. She was a sharp young woman who had been with the company for 3 years. She carried a tablet and a leather folder, looking every bit the part of a high-powered executive's aide. Are you ready for this? David asked his daughter. Zara took a deep breath. I think so. Remember, we're here to educate, not to humiliate, David said. We're going to show him what real class looks like. They walked into the store together. Robert was already approaching, his face lighting up at the sight of such obviously wealthy customers. He had no idea he was about to face the consequences of his actions from the day before. The store looked exactly the same as it had yesterday, but somehow it felt different to Zara. Maybe it was because she wasn't alone this time, or maybe it was because she knew her father had her back. Either way, she felt stronger. Robert was practically bouncing on his toes as he approached them. Good morning. Welcome to Elite Fragrances. I'm Robert, the store manager. How can I help you today? David looked at the man who had hurt his daughter and smiled calmly. Good morning, Robert. I'm David Thompson, and this is my daughter, Zara. I believe you two met yesterday. The color drained from Robert's face as recognition dawned. He looked from David to Zara, then back to David, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. I think there might be some confusion, Robert stammered. No confusion at all, David said, his voice perfectly calm and professional. Yesterday, you asked my daughter to leave your store because you assumed she couldn't afford to shop here. You questioned whether her credit card was real and suggested she shop somewhere more suitable for her budget. I believe you also mentioned having problems with people like her. Other customers in the store had stopped what they were doing and were now watching the conversation unfold. Robert looked around nervously, realizing that his actions from yesterday were about to become very public. Sir, there must have been a misunderstanding, Robert said, sweat beginning to form on his forehead. David pulled out his phone and showed Robert something on the screen. This is my company, Tech Vision Solutions. We did $400 million in business last year. I'm quite sure my daughter can afford anything in your store. Robert's face went from pale to red. He had not only embarrassed a customer, but he had embarrassed the daughter of one of the most successful businessmen in the city. The store fell completely silent. Even the soft background music seemed to fade away as everyone focused on the conversation happening in the center of the shop. Robert's hands were shaking slightly as he processed what David had just revealed. Mr. Thompson, I had no idea, Robert began, but David held up a hand to stop him. That's exactly the problem, Robert, David said, his voice still calm but carrying unmistakable authority. You had no idea because you didn't bother to find out. You made a judgment based entirely on what you saw, a young black girl in casual clothes, and you decided she didn't belong in your store. Zara watched her father with admiration. He wasn't shouting or making threats. He was simply stating facts, but somehow that made his words even more powerful. "Let me ask you something," David continued, looking directly at Robert. "How many other customers have you treated this way? How many other young people have left your store feeling humiliated because you decided they weren't worth your time?" Robert opened his mouth to respond, but no words came out. David's assistant Kelly stepped forward and opened her leather folder. "We did some research last night," Kelly said, her voice professional and crisp. "We found several online reviews mentioning similar incidents. Would you like me to read them?" "That won't be necessary," Robert said quickly, glancing nervously at the other customers who were still watching. David looked around the store, taking in the elegant displays and expensive merchandise. "This is a beautiful store, Robert. You sell quality products to people who appreciate luxury. But luxury isn't just about expensive things. It's about how you treat people. Yesterday you showed my daughter the opposite of luxury service." An elderly white woman who had been browsing nearby stepped closer. "Excuse me," she said to David, "but did this man really ask your daughter to leave yesterday?" "He did," David replied. "He told her she should shop somewhere more suitable for her budget and accused her of trying to use a stolen credit card." The woman looked shocked. "That's terrible. I've been shopping here for years, and if that's how they treat customers, I'll take my business elsewhere." Other customers began murmuring among themselves. Word was spreading quickly through the small store about what had happened. Robert looked like he wanted to disappear. "Mr. Thompson, please," Robert said desperately. "Let me make this right. Your daughter can have anything she wants from the store. No charge. I'll personally apologize to her." David shook his head. "This isn't about getting free merchandise, Robert. This is about understanding the impact of your actions. My daughter didn't come here yesterday looking for charity. She came here as a paying customer with her own money." He turned to Zara, who had been quietly watching the exchange. "Sweetheart, is there anything you'd like to say to Mr. Robert?" Zara had been thinking about this moment since yesterday. She looked at Robert, who was sweating and clearly uncomfortable. Part of her wanted to make him feel as bad as he had made her feel, but her father had taught her better than that. "Yesterday was supposed to be a happy day for me," she said, her voice steady and clear. "I was excited about my graduation and wanted to buy something special to remember it. Instead, you made me feel ashamed of who I am. You made me doubt whether I belong somewhere just because of how I look." Robert's face crumpled. "I'm so sorry. I really am. I made a terrible mistake." "Yes, you did," Zara agreed. "But the worst part wasn't that you made a mistake. It was that you didn't see me as a person. You saw my skin color and my clothes, and you decided you knew everything about me. That's not just rude, it's dangerous thinking." David felt proud of his daughter's maturity and wisdom. She was handling this situation with more grace than many adults would have shown. Kelly stepped forward again. "Mr. Mitchell, we also discovered that this isn't the first time you've had complaints about discriminatory behavior. Your previous employer let you go after similar incidents." Robert's face went pale again. He realized that his current job might be in jeopardy too. "What I don't understand," David said, "is why a business would keep an employee who drives away customers. Do you think my daughter was the only person who left here yesterday and decided never to come back?" He pulled out his phone again and showed Robert a social media post. "My daughter posted about her experience on Instagram last night. She has 2,000 followers. This morning, her post has been shared over 500 times. Robert looked at the phone screen in horror. He could see comments from people saying they would never shop at Elite Fragrances, and some were calling for boycotts. "This is what happens when you treat customers badly in the age of social media," David explained. "Word spreads fast and reputations can be destroyed overnight." Just then, the store's phone rang. Robert answered it reluctantly. "Elite Fragrances, this is Robert." The conversation was brief, but everyone in the store could tell it wasn't good news. Robert's face got redder with each passing second. "Yes, sir. I understand." "Yes, I'll be here," Robert said before hanging up. "That was my boss," he said quietly. "He's seen the social media posts. He's coming down here right now." David nodded. "Good. This conversation needs to involve more than just you. This seems to be a company-wide problem that requires a company-wide solution." While they waited, more customers came into the store. Word was spreading through social media about what was happening, and people were curious to see the confrontation for themselves. Some came to support David and Zara, others just wanted to witness the drama. A young black woman entered the store and immediately recognized what was happening. She approached Zara and introduced herself. "Hi, I'm Lisa. I saw your post online. The same thing happened to me here 6 months ago. I was with my mom and they treated us like we were going to steal something." Another customer, a middle-aged Hispanic man, overheard and joined the conversation. "They did the same thing to my wife last year. We complained to management, but nothing changed." David realized that this was bigger than just his daughter's experience. This store had a pattern of discriminatory behavior that had been going on for years. "Kelly," he said to his assistant, "I want you to document all of this. Get contact information from anyone who's willing to share their experiences." Kelly immediately began talking to the customers who had spoken up, taking notes on her tablet. Christopher Hamilton, the owner of Premium Retail Group, arrived 20 minutes later. He was a man in his 50s, well-dressed but clearly stressed about the situation. He had obviously been briefed on what was happening because he went straight to David. "Mr. Thompson, I'm Christopher Hamilton. I own this store chain. I want to personally apologize for what happened to your daughter yesterday. This is completely unacceptable behavior." David studied the man's face, trying to determine if his concern was genuine or just about protecting his business. "Mr. Hamilton," David said, "I appreciate your apology, but I'm more interested in hearing about what you're going to do to prevent this from happening again." Christopher looked around the store, taking in the crowd of customers and the tension in the air. He realized that this situation could destroy his business if it wasn't handled properly. "I want to make this right," he said. "Tell me what you think would be appropriate." David had been thinking about this question since the night before. He had the power to ruin this man's business, but that wouldn't solve the real problem. What he wanted was lasting change that would protect other customers from experiencing what Zara had gone through. David looked at Christopher Hamilton for a long moment, considering his response carefully. Around them, the store had filled with more than just regular shoppers. Word had spread on social media, and local news reporters had started arriving. This was no longer just a private matter between a father and a store manager. It had become a public conversation about discrimination in retail. "Mr. Hamilton," David began, "what I want isn't complicated, but it will require real commitment from you and your company." Christopher nodded eagerly. "Whatever it takes. First, I want mandatory bias training for every employee in all your stores, not just this one. And I want it to be ongoing, not a one-time event." "Absolutely," Christopher agreed immediately. "Second, I want you to establish a clear policy for handling discrimination complaints, with real consequences for employees who violate it. And I want that policy posted publicly in every store." Christopher was taking notes on his phone. "Done." "Third," David continued, "I want you to partner with local community organizations to rebuild trust with the communities you've alienated. You need to show that you're serious about change, not just trying to manage bad publicity." Kelly stepped forward with her tablet. "We've identified at least 6 other customers today who've had similar experiences in your stores over the past 2 years. This isn't an isolated incident." Christopher's face grew pale as he realized the scope of the problem. "I had no idea it was this widespread. I thought we were just dealing with a few isolated complaints." "That's part of the problem," Zara spoke up, surprising everyone with her clear, confident voice. "You weren't listening to the complaints you did receive. People tried to tell you this was happening, but you didn't take it seriously." David felt proud of his daughter's insight. She was absolutely right. The warning signs had been there, but they had been ignored. One of the news reporters in the crowd stepped forward. "Mr. Thompson, how do you respond to people who might say you're using your wealth and influence to get special treatment?" David had expected this question. "This isn't about special treatment. This is about basic human dignity. Every customer deserves to be treated with respect regardless of their age, race, or how they're dressed. The fact that I have resources to address this situation doesn't make what happened to my daughter any less wrong." He looked around at the crowd. How many other teenagers have been humiliated in stores like this but didn't have a parent who could fight back? How many families have just accepted discrimination because they felt powerless to do anything about it? The reporter nodded and scribbled notes. "What do you hope to accomplish with this public confrontation?" "Education," David replied simply. "I want other business owners to understand that discrimination isn't just morally wrong. It's bad business. In today's connected world, one viral social media post can destroy a company's reputation overnight." Robert, who had been standing quietly to the side, stepped forward. "Mr. Thompson, I know I can't undo what I did yesterday, but I want you to know that I've learned something important today. I never realized how my actions affected people." David studied the manager's face. The man looked genuinely remorseful, not just scared about losing his job. "Robert, what exactly did you learn?" Robert took a deep breath. "I learned that I was making assumptions about people based on stereotypes instead of treating each customer as an individual. I thought I was protecting the store, but I was actually hurting innocent people and damaging the business. And what are you going to do differently going forward?" "I'm going to ask myself before I interact with any customer, am I treating this person the way I would want my own daughter to be treated? And if the answer is no, I'm going to change my approach." Zara looked at Robert with curiosity. Despite what he had put her through yesterday, she found herself believing that his regret was genuine. "Mr. Robert," she said, "do you have children?" "I have a daughter about your age," Robert replied. "Last night I went home and imagined how I would feel if someone treated her the way I treated you. It made me sick to my stomach." The store fell quiet again as people absorbed the emotional weight of Robert's admission. Christopher Hamilton cleared his throat. "Mr. Thompson, in addition to the changes you've requested, I'd like to offer your daughter a formal apology and ask if there's anything else we can do to make amends." David looked at Zara. "What do you think, sweetheart?" "You're the one who was hurt by this." Zara thought for a moment. Yesterday, she had just wanted to buy a perfume for her graduation. Today, she found herself at the center of a conversation about justice and change. "I think," she said slowly, "that the best way to make amends would be to make sure this never happens to anyone else. All the apologies in the world won't help the next teenager who walks into a store and gets judged by their appearance." Christopher nodded. "You're absolutely right. We're going to implement all the changes your father requested, and we're going to do it quickly. Within 30 days, every employee in our company will go through sensitivity training. And I want monthly reports on your progress," David added. "This can't be something you do once and then forget about. Creating an inclusive environment requires ongoing effort." Kelly had been busy documenting everything on her tablet. "Mr. Thompson, we now have contact information for 12 customers who experienced discrimination at various premium retail group locations. Would you like me to connect them with the corporate office?" "Yes," David said. "Every one of these customers deserves an apology and assurance that changes are being made." One of the other customers who had been watching the conversation spoke up. "I just want to say that I'm impressed by how you're handling this. Mr. Thompson, you could have just sued them or tried to destroy their business, but instead you're trying to create positive change." "Revenge doesn't solve problems," David replied. "It might make you feel better temporarily, but it doesn't prevent the same thing from happening to someone else." Christopher looked around at the crowd that had gathered. "I want to make a public statement," he said. "Mr. Thompson, would it be acceptable to you if we held a press conference tomorrow? I want to announce the changes we're making and take full responsibility for what happened." David considered this. "That would be appropriate, but I have one condition. I want Zara to be part of that press conference. This started with her experience, and her voice needs to be heard." Zara felt nervous about the idea of speaking to reporters, but she understood the importance of sharing her story. "I'll do it," she said. "If my story can help prevent this from happening to other people, then it's worth it." The crowd in the store began to disperse as people realized the immediate confrontation was over. But the impact of what had happened would continue to ripple outward through social media, news coverage, and word of mouth. As they prepared to leave the store, David turned to Robert one more time. "I hope you understand that this isn't about ruining your life. This is about helping you become a better person and a better employee." Robert nodded gratefully. "I understand, sir, and I want to thank you for handling this with such class. A lot of people would have just tried to get me fired." "Getting you fired wouldn't teach you anything," David replied. "But going through this experience might make you think twice before you make assumptions about people." As they walked toward the door, Zara realized she still hadn't bought her graduation perfume. She mentioned this to her father, who smiled. "Would you like to make that purchase now?" he asked. Zara looked back at the store, then at all the people who were still milling around outside. "Actually, I think I'd rather find a different store. Yesterday this was about buying perfume, but today it's about something much bigger. I want to remember this day for the right reasons." David put his arm around his daughter's shoulders as they walked to their car. I'm proud of you for how you handled this situation. You showed more maturity than many adults would have. I learned from the best, Zara replied, looking up at her father with admiration. As they drove away from Elite Fragrances, both David and Zara knew that this experience would stay with them forever. But they also knew that their actions today might prevent other families from going through the same painful experience. 3 weeks later, Zara sat in her bedroom working on her valedictorian speech for graduation. The events at Elite Fragrances had changed her perspective on many things, and she wanted to share some of those lessons with her classmates. The press conference that Christopher Hamilton had held made national news. The story of the billionaire father defending his daughter had resonated with people across the country. But more importantly, it had sparked conversations in businesses everywhere about how they treat their customers. David knocked on her door and came in carrying a small shopping bag. I have something for you, he said with a smile. Zara looked up from her computer. What is it? Your graduation perfume, David said, setting the bag on her desk. I know you said you wanted to find a different store, so I asked Kelly to research the most inclusive, customer-friendly fragrance boutique in the city. Zara opened the bag and found a beautiful bottle of perfume, along with a handwritten note from the store owner, congratulating her on her graduation and thanking her family for their advocacy work. The owner is a young black woman who started her business, specifically because she was tired of being treated badly in other stores, David explained. She's built her entire company culture around respect and inclusion. Zara tested the perfume on her wrist. It smelled like freedom and possibility. It's perfect, Dad, thank you. There's something else, David said. I've been getting calls from business schools and universities asking if you'd be willing to share your story with their students. They want to use what happened as a case study in customer service and business ethics. Zara considered this. Over the past few weeks, she had received hundreds of messages from young people who had experienced similar discrimination. Many of them thanked her for speaking out and said her story had given them courage to report their own experiences. I think I'd like to do that, she said. If it helps future business leaders understand the impact of their actions, it's worth it. David's phone buzzed with a text message. He read it and smiled. What is it? Zara asked. It's from Kelly. She's been tracking the progress at Premium Retail Group. They just completed their second round of sensitivity training, and customer satisfaction scores at all their stores have increased by 40%. What about Robert? Zara asked. She had found herself thinking about the store manager occasionally, wondering if he had really changed or just learned to hide his prejudices better. Actually, he's become one of their best advocates for the new policies. He's been helping to train other managers and sharing his story about how unconscious bias affected his judgment. David sat down in the chair next to Zara's desk. You know, when this first happened, I was so angry I could barely think straight. All I wanted was to protect you from being hurt like that again. But you didn't just protect me, Zara said. You protected other people too. That's what made the difference, David nodded. Your generation gives me hope. You understand that individual success isn't enough. You have to lift others up too. Zara saved her work on the computer and turned to face her father fully. Can I ask you something? When you were my age and people treated you badly because of prejudice, how did you handle it? David was quiet for a moment, remembering his own difficult experiences. Honestly, most of the time I just tried to ignore it or prove them wrong by working twice as hard as everyone else. I didn't have the luxury of confronting discrimination directly because I was worried about keeping my job or staying in school. Do you think that was wrong? Not wrong, David said carefully. Just different. Everyone has to choose their battles based on their circumstances. The difference is that now we have the resources and platform to fight battles that other people can't fight for themselves. Zara's phone buzzed with a notification. She looked at it and smiled. What is it? David asked. It's a message from Lisa, the woman who spoke up at the store that day. She says she just got promoted to regional manager at her company, and she's implementing diversity and inclusion training based on what she learned from our situation. David felt proud of how the ripple effects of their actions were continuing to spread. That's the real victory right there. Not just changing one store, but inspiring other people to create change in their own workplaces. Over the following months, the impact of what happened at Elite Fragrances continued to grow. The story was featured in business school textbooks as an example of how social media could hold companies accountable for discriminatory practices. Several other retail chains proactively implemented bias training to avoid similar controversies. Robert Mitchell became an unlikely spokesperson for change in the retail industry. He spoke at conferences about unconscious bias and the importance of treating every customer with dignity. His transformation from someone who perpetuated discrimination to someone who actively fought against it became a powerful example of how people could grow and change. Christopher Hamilton's company not only survived the controversy, but actually became more profitable as they attracted customers who appreciated their commitment to inclusive service. Other business owners took notice and began implementing similar policies, but perhaps the most important change was in Zara herself. The experience had shown her the power of speaking up against injustice, even when it was uncomfortable. She began volunteering with organizations that fought discrimination and started a scholarship fund for students from underrepresented communities. On graduation day, as Zara walked across the stage to receive her diploma, she wore the perfume her father had bought her from the inclusive boutique. The scent reminded her not of the painful experience at Elite Fragrances, but of the positive changes that had come from refusing to accept discrimination. In her valedictorian speech, she talked about the importance of using privilege responsibly and standing up for others who might not have a voice. She didn't mention the specific incident, but everyone in the audience understood what she was referring to. "We have a choice," she told her classmates. "We can use our education and opportunities just to benefit ourselves, or we can use them to make the world more fair and just for everyone. I challenge each of you to think about how you can use whatever advantages you have to lift up others." After the ceremony, as families celebrated and took photos, David pulled Zara aside. "I'm proud of you," he said, "not just for your academic achievements, but for the person you've become. You've learned that real success isn't just about what you accomplish. It's about how many people you help along the way." Zara hugged her father tightly. "I learned that from you, Dad. You showed me that having power means nothing if you don't use it to protect people who can't protect themselves." As they walked back to join the celebration, Zara reflected on how much her life had changed since that day she walked into Elite Fragrances, looking for a simple graduation gift. She had learned lessons about prejudice, privilege, and responsibility that no classroom could have taught her. But most importantly, she had learned that one person speaking up against injustice could create waves of change that reached far beyond what they ever imagined. The young girl who had been humiliated in a perfume store had become a young woman who understood her power to make the world better. Years later, when Zara had children of her own, she would tell them this story. She would teach them that facing discrimination was painful, but that staying silent in the face of injustice was even worse. She would show them that true strength came not from wealth or success, but from using whatever advantages you had to create a more just world for everyone. The perfume bottle still sat on her dresser, a reminder that sometimes the most difficult experiences led to the most important lessons. And every time she caught its scent, she remembered her father's words. "With privilege comes responsibility," was a lesson she would carry with her for the rest of her life. The story that began with a teenager being judged by her appearance had become a testament to the power of standing up for what's right, even when it's difficult. It proved that change was possible when people were willing to use their voices and their platforms to fight for justice. And in boardrooms and retail stores across the country, managers and executives remembered the lesson of Elite Fragrances. Treat every customer with dignity, because you never know whose daughter you might be turning away.